Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. And this week I wanted to talk about a set of Napoleonic Wargames rules that came out as a free edition in Wargames Illustrated back in autumn last year. A second version of Valour and Fortitude from Jervis Johnson and the Perry brothers. Not actually played the original game myself, and we have very large 15mm Napoleonic armies which have accumulated over many years, and suggested to the guys maybe we finally get this on the table last night just to sort of have a playthrough, see what we think. And I thought I'd do a little video today just to sort of share my thoughts on the game, a few photographs and general opinion really on whether we'll play it again, and things maybe that we feel could be improved. Little Wars TV have done a great video showing you how to play this game, and to be honest, without that I think it would have taken us a bit longer to pick it up. It's not a difficult game. It is literally, as it's branded, 4 pages of rules. But as you can see, and this is the original paper version, it's in extremely small fonts and packed to the rafters with text, and a little in the way of pictures showing working examples, etc. There's a few little bits and pieces in there. There's some nice photographs to show you some examples of play, but for me the layout was the biggest issue. Certainly better than the first edition, but for me still it's a little bit all over the place, as I found out when I started trying to play the game last night. So this follows very similar theme, I would say, to Black Powder, which obviously replicates the kind of style of play perhaps Jervis and the Perry brothers have used in the past with their 28mm armies, which you'll have seen on YouTube. Absolutely beautiful, stunning tables, and so everything related to this game has also been portrayed in 28mm. But because there's no casualty removal, I would say that you could probably get away with any scale, as long as your basing sizes replicate the same on both sides. That shouldn't be a problem. The QRS on the back, again, some key elements missing in there, a bit bland. Little Wars have done a QRS which is much easier to follow, and some of their own house rules in there, so that can be a little bit confusing if you're not sure, and you're looking back at the rule book. You may get different ranges, for example, or move distances and things like that, so just be aware of that. The game can easily be house ruled if you want to tweak certain things. I think we certainly would going forward, but what I would say as an overall viewpoint is that I think there's a gem of a little game in here, and I'd like to thank Jervis Johnson and Alan and Michael Perry for releasing this game to the public free of charge, because it is a really good fun Napoleonic game, with some chrome in there as well, which for me particularly I like. So you have like a very nice command and control mechanic built into the game. It is I go you go, which I know does not appeal to everybody. I'm quite relaxed about that. So one side takes all their turn, all 4 phases, then the next side, and so forth. But there are other things at play here. So each side has their fake cards, which are a little bit chromy, a little bit perhaps national statistic, although a lot of them are very similar or the same, but they add a little bit of chrome to your particular force, and you draw 1 card each turn, which you can use at any point in the battle. They're 1 shot and gone, so once you've used them there's no return unless you pick up a card that allows you to replenish those. But that's a nice element, and we used those cards at some quite crucial times, had some quite crucial effects on the game last night, so that was interesting. I also like the command and control. So you have an army commander, the all-seeing army commander, and then you have your brigadiers. Each turn when you activate, your nearest brigade or brigade close enough to your army commander can activate for free with no issue, but the others you have to roll. Generally you're trying to avoid a 1 on a d6, so it's in the main you're going to be to activate most things you want, but it adds a little bit of friction into the game, which I really liked. And typically for the French, who I was playing with my friend Mike, we managed to roll a good number of 1s, so that did cause some challenges for our side, certainly throughout the game. So some nice bits in there. Likewise, taking that one step further, then within the individual brigades, if your units are too far away from their brigadier, you need to send messengers to those regiments and battalions. And again, that's sometimes quite difficult to get those messages through. So you may activate the brigade, but may only find you can activate certain regiments or battalions within that brigade. So again, a really nice, simplistic aspect, but did add some, I think, quite key command and control, which for Napoleonic era warfare for me is a big thing and something I really liked. So it's a big thumbs up for me. The rest of the key mechanics are what you would expect. Firing comes before actions like movement and combat. I quite like that as well. I think that made you really think about, well, if I fire these troops now, or utilize my cannon or fire my muskets, then I'm limiting what they can or can't do in an action phase. And again, you've got elements with light troops where you can do aspects of both. You've got a little bit more flexibility. Likewise, you've got a bit more flexibility with command and control with those independent sort of light companies or detachments and things like that. So again, really like those little chromy elements that give you that Napoleonic feel. Artillery is an interesting one. I've played various Napoleonic rule sets over the years and read quite a lot on Napoleonic warfare, and by no means do I claim to be a scholar in it by any means, but I think most people would admit that artillery played a very critical part in Napoleonic warfare, particularly from Napoleon's point of view, and I'm sure was a big contributor to casualty numbers as it was in wars later on, like the American Civil War, for example. Guns in these games are cleverly not too effective in their own right in terms of cannonade, i.e. firing, but where they come into their own is in their support capacity to units such as infantry into a melee or defensively, and they start to add some really tangible bonuses to the units around them. And I thought, again, that was quite a clever dynamic, and only one we really started to identify with towards the end of our first game. That's something certainly be giving a fair bit of thought to going forward when I'm planning future games. We just played a meeting engagement. We just set ourselves a points value, 275 points. In 15mm, we played in centimetres rather than inches to scale down ranges and movement, and that worked really, really well. I think anything 15mm or less, you could get away with centimetres or halving ranges in inches. Anything above that, you probably would go to inches again. Other actions, you've got normal movements. You can reform, which allows you to do manoeuvres. You've got retreats, you've got assaults, and you've got doubling, which is like a strategic move until you close to the enemy. So you can get into the action, get things moving quite quickly. And what we realised very quickly with doubling was that's a really good way of potentially bringing in reserve brigades or keeping reserves back and being able to bring them in quickly to fill critical elements or points in the battlefield. Because of the scale of our game last night, we didn't have much in the way of reserves. because it was a learning game with a limited number of brigades per side. My brother playing the Russians had 3 brigades of fairly similar strength, sort of 3-4 infantry regiments, a bit of cavalry, a gun, roughly was the sort of size across each of those 3. The French I designed to have a large brigade. They had four regiments of infantry with a light infantry regiment, a gun and some chasseur cavalry. A small brigade, sort of like a reserve stroke holding brigade, was 2 regiments of young guard with 2 infantry detachments and a gun. And then I had a standalone cavalry brigade, which was just 1 regiment of dragoons with its own separate brigadier. I had seen from the videos that people were saying sometimes cavalry works better in its own brigades, and obviously having its own brigadier, which doesn't cost anything, kind of allows that command and control to work that little bit better. So that was my reasoning behind that. But of course, generally speaking, we won't be playing points games because we're not big points army builder type players. Would prefer to do a historical scenario. But I think for a pickup game, points are fine. I think this game lends itself to both, which is really nice. Gives you choices. Melees, frankly, are brutal. Brigades start to break very, very quickly. And as you lose or start to come under pressure with 1 or 2 regiments or battalions in a brigade, the whole brigade starts to suffer, and this is what we saw last night. So on my left flank I had my young guard, my infantry detachments, my dragoons moving up towards a farmhouse. The Russians came in the other side, got in there quicker because I'd rolled a 1 to activate, and then there was this sort of assault went in with the 2 young guard regiments onto the farmhouse. First round of combat, we did lots of damage to the regiment holding the farmhouse. They kind of pulled out, filtered in another fresh one. The young guard took some attritional damage. The second one, another combat, that unit got routed from the buildings. The young guard were both teetering on the edge of becoming shaken. But that one regiment going caused a domino effect in the Russian brigade as a whole, because he had accrued 3 significant sort of battlefield events with his brigadier due to damage that had been gradually building up. Because that regiment broke, a couple of the regiments nearby also broke because they were shaken, and then the brigade started to waver, and then you had this catastrophic kind of domino effect, which ultimately led to the whole brigade disappearing off the table. So that was quite interesting to see. By that point, however, my dragoons and young guard were all teetering on the edge of being shaken and were in no fit state to offer anything else to the battle until they had time to rest, which is about when we'd run out of time for the evening. On the other side, on the right flank, the Russians advanced quite quickly. Their heavy cavalry regiment forced the French advance to stop, kind of form into square and take cover. And just at the critical point, really, the Russians were forced to pull their dragoons back. And then we had this kind of assault going on, which the French brigade, teetering on the edge, started to fragment and break up as well. So at the end of the game, we'd kind of had this seesaw effect of 2 brigades pretty much being broken, 1 teetering on the edge, and then the other one in fairly good condition. So it was quite an interesting way of learning some of the key elements of the rules. But brigades, you need to really watch their morale. You need to really use the rally activation when you can, because once they start to falter, it's very hard to stop that rot. And once they go, the whole lot can go very quickly, leading to very large gaps on the battlefield. But again, we both and we all discussed this at the end. We both all felt that that's where the critical point about reserves, reinforcements are critical in these games, as they were historically. So there's some army lists in the main rule book for the British and the French, along with a little bit of commentary around some of the special effects. So again, a little bit of chrome in each army list. So the French, for example, for a lot of their main infantry units, get a lan, which if they assault in a column formation, they can get a bonus in combat as part of that elan, but in any other formation or if they're defending, they don't get that. So it kind of encourages the right historical tactics. Likewise, it was nice to see light cavalry with carbines being able to skirmish using fire, which a lot of rule sets in Napoleonics don't do that. Some interesting rules around skirmishing and light infantry. I like those. I thought that worked really well. And then you've got other elements in there, such as your guards, squares, all the usual things you would expect in the game. And interestingly, lancers didn't sort of get any particular bonuses. You've got some optional rules in there for historic leaders. So if you want to, you do a historical scenario with a historical leader, you can add some elements in there of that. I like that as well. And as I say, I very much liked the fate card mechanic with the chrome that brings into the game as well. So overall, really enjoyed Valour Fortitude. For me, as I say, the layout and sometimes navigating, finding rules is quite tricky. The play sheet needs a little bit of an upgrade to make it a little bit more user friendly. But once you've got the key mechanics, the game runs really, really quickly. And after those initial sort of stumbling blocks, as I would say, we found our way through the game quite quickly, got our heads around it. There were a few little things we missed, things that we pick up and use next time, like the melee support factors and how they work. We had to read that a few times just to get our heads completely around how that all works. But overall, very enjoyable. Got the Napoleonic bug back. And we've got a number of Napoleonic rules to try. We're hoping to give our next one, which is the Warwickkin raid set, Napoleonic rules as well. I can't remember what they are now off the top of my head. Soldiers of Napoleon. Yeah. So we've got these to try as well. Which again, a very different approach. So report back once we've played that and perhaps do a little bit of comparison between the two styles. I would suggest, from what I've read already, Soldiers of Napoleon will be much more involved than Valour Fortitude, but it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in a ordinary club night game. But I hope you've enjoyed this short insight into Valour Fortitude, my opinions, having had a game, and my opinions of the rules themselves. Hope that's useful. Any questions, put them in the comments as usual. And of course, if you've not been to the channel before, please click and subscribe, join our community, and hope to bring you some more content very soon. Thanks for watching.